It's a nice afternoon. Hello everyone and most welcome to H884. Let's have a look see here. It's quite chilly today. I will try to put a little bit more clothes on. I prefer to be outside still to enjoy the last of the day. Close the jacket just for a bit. Keep some of the heat. Let's see here, where were we? Or rather, when were we? I would like to talk once more about time. And this is this delightful book by Susie Frobel, Fractal Time, and with the subtitle Why a Watched Kettle Never Boils. I think we have the opposite in Sweden. We say, why boiling milk always boils when you're not looking. But, well, it actually amounts to the same thing. Speaking of which, time seemed to be a most important key to understand space. When we have this metaphysics of presence, what happens is we get stuck in a now, and what do we get when we are stuck in a now? We get the idea of subject in front of object in space, and in this space both the coordinates are still, they're non-moving, and so is space itself. The interrelation between space and objects is still in a way, and the origo doesn't move either. It's fixed somewhere, but it's never ever mentioned where is it fixed. This is this hidden assumption about the fixity of the origo that Newton never answered. It was one of his questions he never went into. Why didn't he answer it? Well, because it would have needed for him to take a completely brand new look on both time and space, and he was not willing to do that. That was without a doubt. So the fixity we find in Newtonian idea of reality, it's an effect of forgetting some things. It's a perceived fixity which is impossible in reality. I'm taking a pause there. I really need to have a... So let's continue. Susie Frobel opens the question about time. And time is a very important factor in understanding how to dissolve space, or the stuckedness we mentioned before about space. And this is this persistent idea or experience of space being stable in some way and connected to this origo. There is a very interesting parallel with the origo and the presence. All Western thinking have a very, very heavy weight pressing towards presence. Everything is presence. It's circulating around this centrism, and it's always defined in what it is not. It is defined in absence. The now is what is not absent. It's not the past. The past is the defining feature. And that is part of the problem. The defining feature doesn't make for a proper now, so to speak. Because a proper now shouldn't be defined, well, at least not in that way. What Husserl tries at is to show a rather working definition connected to what we do, and consciousness for him is a sort of doing. It is looking into retention and protension. Retention is organizing not one's memory as in the old take, but what is at hand, what earlier was present, so to speak. Yeah, it's in a way, retention is very close to the idea of, in ordinary language, now. But with that difference, it is active. It's not memories in the idea of stale, fixated memories, because absence is no longer something lesser, something deadened, something not alive, something fossilized, sterile. Black and white is a description that often comes to fore. And actually black and white isn't half bad. Whereas this presence is fixed presence that make for objects in space in front of subjects so we perceive them, is free things, it's gleaming with light, it is constructed before presencing happens, it's a preemptive take on presencing, it's a sort of a priori, could even be called a sort of biased. So we have an inclination before anything really happened. And this goes against the rhythm of time as well. It's not playing with time, just the opposite. It's a subject sticking up in a way, the ego, and it's defying the flow of time, not working together with it. So it comes before, it decides what time is, and then afterwards, in this system, with the I system, the ego system, it turns into just a memory, a deadened memory, no longer bursting with life. And that is the same trait that is used to construct the gleaming presence, the shining presence. Where does it get its shininess from? It gets it from not being the unshiny thing. So it's a derived shine. It's a secondary, derived, second-hand shine. It's not of this world. And this is this gleamy light that actually gets described very often by philosophers and thinkers and authors. It's a sort of dusk light. I think it's very close to the light is coming in here, where it's both a bit foggy, there is a gray tonality to the sky, it's cold, it's sort of not flowering yet, we have some buds, but this grayness is often what is described of the present, not really alive. It doesn't have much liveliness to it, so it needs to define itself even more. It needs to use argument, it needs to be half aggressive to claim its liveliness. The now of the amnesia, the post-amnesia, 2,500 years of now fixation is sort of fanatical, because it uses argument to claim I'm alive, shouting arguments and using negations to prove sort of I am alive, I am in this presence. It's not very flexible, it's not flowing. It's maybe the furthest you can get from the idea of flow, of this easiness when past and future can enter and make it truly alive, not live in the argumentative way, by the opposition way, a halfway aggressive way of claiming its own liveliness. The liveliness of all those Zen philosophers, Alan Watts, D.T. Suzuki, and loads more, they all claim they are very alive. It's an argumentative, passive defensive claim of nowness. They try to convince first themselves and then other that they are really alive. It's a more dishonest way of being than Plato, who accepted and said that he was not alive. He was striving for this. These people, the Zen people, gone a bit further. They claim they're alive, and they're putting loads of rather harsh arguments, have an undertone of being too fixed, too attacking, on the defense, defending their position because it's empty. They don't feel the joy of full presencing. They only have this present to hold on to. And with this present come this fixation, the open, hard eyes. And this example I would think most keenly of my ex Gordo. His name was, what was his name? I forgot. Adeshimaro, his gleaming eyes. To fixate it, to look at the now and the present, to present the things as they are, as he often said. And this is just the opposite of being in time, inviting past and future, letting them having their space, and thereby also the present, which is in Husserl's take. This is the first approach to this, but in Husserl's take, presence is consciousness. Consciousness building an eye point randomly, using that as a vantage point to reflect upon. First, retention. Retention is the building up and the reflecting of things, whatever they are. They don't even have to be called in the regular talk past. They could be present. It could actually be future in some ways. There is an overlap when it comes to retention of the ordinary way of thinking future. When you get really hard into it, the ordinary way of talking about future doesn't make much sense, because how many actions and goals don't we know by heart? I think the majority of our daily actions are already well established. They're already there. And this makes a lot more sense also from a neurological perspective. Why is that? Well, I say the main reason is we know today that actions are not coming from the idea of I plan into the future. What is actually happening when we do actions is that we make the prefrontal cortex sort of enlightened, engaged, and we stop certain pretensions from happening, because all the actions are already stored. It's almost impossible to perform anything new because it's way too complicated. Neurologically speaking, learning how to lit a cigarette, it's an endless process of tryout, and it's rather complicated. And in the end, you put a light to the end of the cigarette, you light it, you keep the light perilously close to your nose, your eyes and everything. Once you learn it, which takes a while, it doesn't take any action. But to stop, to sort of activate and do something, perform something, you need to stop other actions, because it will happen by itself. We stop everyone bar one, the one to light your cigarette or start your vape, and that will happen. So pretension and retention fits the neurological perspective much more. And from a neurological perspective, it is nonsense to say that we plan the future, like building things up in steps and then performing it. All our more complicated actions are already stored, and we have millions of them. Millions and millions of different actions. And this is the mistake one has done previously with people with damage to the prefrontal cortex. They are excellent when it comes to talking. They have all, in this perspective they used to be, they have all the memories to do, they can plan, they can tell what they're supposed to do. In the example of Price's sister, the first neurologist who described this, she could plan the kitchen action beforehand, but she couldn't perform, which is completely different from planning. Future is not what we think in ordinary language, not at all. And of course we get fooled by the metaphors that we use for future. That is something ahead of us. This is very confusing. And this is as simple as this. The metaphor has been chosen because the misunderstanding of future. It has developed after that. This is not the spatial derived metaphor that was used before this misunderstanding or this amnesia. And this is not the thing one using in most other cultures. One using not a uniform one, but different ones, but they suit the purpose much better. Something that makes a lot more sense is the very common you look into the past or what you experience, because that's what you can see, that's what you can regulate, that is the time, so to speak, that you can fix, whereas the pretension gets fixed later on from the action of consciousness. And consciousness is, in this perspective, the now. Froebel or Wrobel writes like this, and now I know her name is Froebel because she's a Jerry. In order to describe a temporal observer perspective, we have to assume two mutually independent temporal dimensions, the depth and the length of time, which respectively correspond to simultaneity and succession. These define the degree of complexity a temporal observer perspective displays. Observer types might be distinguished in terms of their ability to create simultaneous contrast or to resist contextualization. The setting of the interfacial cut between The observer participant and the rest of the world determines the structure of the fractal temporal observer perspective by assigning rhythms to the observer or to the rest of the world. Misattribution occurs when the observer perspective becomes hardwired and immune to external perturbations. i.e., if only the observed perspective but no external rhythm determine his interface reality. Neglecting time is what's happening in our ordinary speak and ordinary experience. We don't care about time. We just say beforehand that there are two different times, one objective and one subjective, and this is as far as the thinking goes. It's a stopping of thinking to say those things. They are actually thinking blocks. If you go further down into the business and keenly observe what is at hand, one could start to realize something is not just or correct or rational. Something is amiss. And it's this very idea that time somehow is out there. And the second thing is that time is only in there. Both of these different takes are equally wrong. And in the end, what wins is the inner perspective. The idea that I can control time without caring about it. That is not true. So what we see is an emotionalized time. An idea that your emotions somehow unconsciously, without your knowing, regulate time. And you start looking at the clock and you think the emotion that turns up is time. One dimension is not enough is the next paragraph. If we wish to describe the nature and structure of time, we face a good limit. As observer participants, we are already embedded in the subject matter we wish to define, time. We cannot describe temporal structure from an exo-perspective. It's an outside vantage point of view. Something you might recognize from our treatment of space. Thomas Nagel, A World at Large, or A Perspective from Nowhere, and so forth and so forth. The Origo. This perspective is reserved for idealized constructs, such as Laplace's demon, which find no counterpart in the real world. And I think this is mostly interesting. Both the demon of Laplace and the Origo of Cartesian coordinates and the point of undisturbed centeredness in Newtonian physics, that is actually called the center of the universe, or a center that we choose, both which are completely hopelessly undoable in a movable universe where there is no stable point, although Newton in this case actually argued for the very opposite, using the bucket as his example of a vantage point that could be completely stable. To put this in very few words, if you establish or try to establish by ignoring many factors the stable vantage point, you get paradoxes elsewhere. And while you're trying to ignore these, or you are not even aware of them, maybe the latter is more common, that will hamper your possibility of entering both time and space, because there is an interconnectedness. And that interconnectedness is the origo-like feature of present. How many of these Eastern philosophers, including Fritjof Capra, Gary Zukav, do not glorify the eternal present somewhere, in some unreachable world, and they're still striving to get to this eternal present even to this day. One could say, Susie Frobel continues, we are limited to an endo perspective, that's an inner perspective, as we are part of the system we wish to describe. The notion of the endo perspective was introduced by Otto E. Rössler in his seminal work Endophysics. In a nutshell, this perspective is determined by the observer's internal organization, i.e., his internal microscopic movements. As Ernst Pöppel pointed out, also our modes of perception acts are constraints to the way we generate reality. Our models and theories are based on our primary experience of time, namely succession, simultaneity, duration, and the now with a big N. These primary experiences are based on embodied cognition, on a cognitive level of description, hereafter denoted as LOD. Our endo perspective is also structured by metaphors, which arise from the limitations set by the observer's sensory motor system. We are already thrown into the world means a little bit more when one really delves into it. And it's an a priori fixation. It happens before the rhythm of the time. And what you do is you put in the brakes. It's a little bit like when you are pulling a donkey and the donkey all of a sudden decides, I don't want to go. It's not like the donkey doesn't want to go some other direction. He puts in his brakes. I don't want to go into the direction I'm pulled. We do the same by establishing metaphysics of the presence. This stubborn thing which borders too fanatical in the Western society. The eternal now that sheds its light on the objects, make the objects spring into existence, and with the object we get this permanent subject. Confined to the now, it doesn't last long, this subject, sometimes called the reflective consciousness by Robert E. Lind, or as some call it, the ego. The ego is a construct of the moment. Very, very impermanent. And this goes for most Westerners today, don't have any sense of permanence in their reality expressions. It is just scattered moments, and these scattered moments don't have a continuation. It's like a Super 8 movie going very, very slow. It cuts. So there are cutted moments with no sequencing, and we design sequencing to the moments after it has happened. So we have the capabilities of pretension or retention that have been discovered in urology, and there is a corporal movement when we do pretension, and that's leaning 1/5 of a degree forwards. That's what's happening when we do pretension. Retention is leaning backwards usually. This very movement is a physical movement, cannot be done without a physical involvement. This gets hampered by the fixation of the now. But the now is only one side of the thing. It's a double lock. The other lock is the real world with its objects. And we already talked about how the objects get constructed, and it gives a specific gaze, this sharpened gaze that really tries to find the objects before they appear. I want to see a cup in front of me even before it's there. And it's a preemptive lockdown of reality. And it also goes hand in hand with the tension in the body, which is called the attitudinal position. It's a tensing in a specific way that is actually more or less shared by everyone in Western society. And it blocks out reality. Instead, it puts a pre-arranged order to things. And if the things in the world, the rhythm in the world is different, our preemptive order wins. And that discrepancy is what I usually call stress. It's not understanding the temporal flow of the world. It is being like the donkey. Instead of walking or trotting or whatever a donkey does, we force our lockdown on time with using muscular force and brain force as well, because the N2s are very much connected to this trauma, whatever you call it, this malfunctioning of the individual. Both Husserl and also Bergson, they understood it was a big problem with this difference between subject and object time, and it didn't matter what you did. If you said only subjective time is real, you are damned. And if you say that only objective time is correct, you're also damned. So they had their own arrangements, and both Bergson and Husserl are actually very close to quantum time. Quantum time doesn't have a division between subjective and objective time. It's neither. They are both mistakes. So you can't sort of deduce what is real time from subjective nor objective time. You need to go into those and see how these mistaken perceptions come about. And in the very same moment you understand that, they will be immediately dissolved like they've never been. Like all misunderstandings, they just vanish once you understand better. This is of course what Derrida called difference, because in the end a locking mechanism is also identity. And a presensing person, a present fixated person, always have the idea of self-identity. So this moment is completely identical to this moment somehow. And that makes everything in this moment be completely identical to itself. Whereas Derrida uses difference to show it's always different. The essence of the world, experience in itself is difference. And this is what we mean by experience. There's no other way of having experience than difference. From sameness, no experience spring, because sameness is in itself a sort of no knowledge. This could be likened to if you put a stone in the earth, no plant would grow from it. But you can't criticize the act of putting a stone into the ground, or refining the stone somehow so it becomes a seed. You have to start all over. And that comes with the understanding putting a stone into the ground won't produce a plant. And so it's very problematic trying to start with subjective and objective time and getting to real time. That could never ever happen. And as long as you think there is some reality to subjective and objective time, you need to go into these things further. You really need to understand them. But there's no chance in hell deriving proper time from neither subjective or objective time. There are no materials to build a real time. Well, it's like the same, you can't construct a tractor from using water or flowers. You might wish you could do it, but it can't happen. I think that is very important in common intellectual climate today. You think you can construct everything just by saying it. I think that was maybe the case with most New Age philosophers like Alan Watts. If I say it because I want it, it will happen. Well, it's hardly ever like that. Things are working in a certain way. We ignoring some aspect of reality can claim different things, but it won't make any difference. Reality is as it is anyway. Another way of explaining this, it's often called, the idea of an objective and subjective time is most commonly called a subjectification of time or emotionalization of time. And that's a lack of knowledge. It's not so much a stance or an opinion as a lack of knowledge. And if you don't know how to drive a car, arguing won't help you. You need to learn something you've been too ignorant to learn, or too lazy to learn, or rather you haven't known about. I think that's the most correct way of talking about that. It's to learn something completely new, to learn time. So it's a lack of knowledge, and that cannot be treated by arguing. As little it would be possible to learn somebody to drive a car by arguing. It wouldn't work. You simply need to learn. But as a starting point, understanding that subjective objective time are no proper divisions for the first. I think that's very important to understand. You can't divide two things where none of the things makes any sense. So neither can you make a division, and by absolving the division you don't solve anything either. You get even further into the idea that they have some reality to them. So subjective and objective time doesn't make for real time at all. They are both preemptive, static, a priori pretensions of time. It's almost like we discussed it with that lady in the first pod we had, and she still lingered on with the idea that I need to take a rest to have my own free time somehow. That won't solve any problems, I would say. This is ideas from Husserl really looks deeply into this and see the problem somewhere and solves it in a way that is most excellent, actually, as a starting point. I think in this presenting now, it's a very good time to stop. I will do pretension of having a fika or something like that, because I'm a bit hungry. And I say thank you very much, and I wish you a very pleasant afternoon. Goodbye for now.